All right. Last week, I had us look at a short passage in Isaiah, and I talked about happiness. And that subject matter seemed to strike a bit of a chord with some folks. And so I thought, why not do a short sermon series dealing with happiness? So we're going to be looking at the book of Philippians for the next couple of weeks because I believe that it has a lot to teach all of us about happiness. There are two interesting details about the book of Philippians. One, I feel that Philippians is is Paul's most upbeat book that he wrote. And two, it was written during one of the most difficult times in his life. Paul wrote Philippians from prison as he was facing an uncertain future, possibly even facing execution. And while in prison, some of his so-called Christian brothers and fellow ministers actually took pride in his predicament. They were thrilled that he was in jail. And yet, in the book of Philippians, Paul is brimming with joy and enthusiasm. So, now let's quickly define a term. While I say that this series will be about happiness, Philippians, depending on what translation you're reading, but it never really uses the term happiness. It uses the term joy. So is there a difference? If you want to split hairs, yes, there probably is. But maybe not. Okay? Nothing like a solid answer there, right? Happiness, it's been said, is based on circumstances, on happenings in your life. But joy is something deeper. And there is some truth to that. But for our purposes, we're going to be talking about happiness that is not based on circumstances, but is instead rooted in our relationship with Christ. So whether you call it joy or whether you call it happiness, the main thing is that the book of Philippians shows us how to experience it. Not just sometimes, but all the time. There's a story about a tribal chief who told his young grandson a parable about the human condition. He said, "Son, there are two wolves inside each of us. One is good and one is bad. One fights for anger, greed, jealousy, and rage. The other fights for kindness, joy, love, and happiness. These two wolves fight it out every day, and it's up to you to determine which wolf will win." And the young boy asked, "How do I determine this?" And the old chief said, "Son, the wolf you feed is the wolf who wins the battle." And in a nutshell, that's the key to experiencing ongoing happiness. You feed whatever it is you want to grow. You feed whatever it is you want to be strong. You feed whatever it is you want to win the battle for supremacy in your life. Abraham Lincoln once said, "Most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be." And we're going to see that that's pretty much of a true statement. Because when it comes down to it, happiness is a choice that we make. It's a habit that we develop. Long-term happiness has nothing at all to do with the circumstances of your life, but it has everything to do with your thoughts and opinions and attitudes about the circumstances of your life. Over the years, there have been countless studies done on happiness. In a University of Minnesota study, David Lycan discovered that there's an amazingly very little connection between one's life's circumstances and one's predominant moods. He studied people in all kinds of situations and circumstances. Some who had great fortune, such as winning the lottery, and others who had great misfortune, like suffering health problems or losing the use of their legs in a serious accident. And Dr. Lycan discovered that the overwhelming majority of people returned to their usual temperament within a year of their fortune or misfortune. In other words, winning the lottery doesn't really make people happier in the long run if they were unhappy before, because they eventually go back to that pattern. A Stanford University study in 1994 revealed that happy people and unhappy people tend to have very similar life experiences. It's not that happy people experience one success after another and unhappy people experience one failure after another. Their lives are pretty much the same in that respect. The difference, the study concluded, is that the average unhappy person spends more than twice as much time thinking about unpleasant events in their lives, while happy people tend to think about things that will brighten their personal outlook. Research done by Richard Davison at the University of Wisconsin showed that people who have high levels of brain activity in their left prefrontal cortex tend to experience feelings of joy and happiness and optimism and energy, while people who have high levels of brain activity in the right prefrontal cortex are more prone to feelings of sadness and pessimism and anxiety. Every person has a tendency towards one side or the other, kind of like a factory default setting that we're born with, which is why some people are naturally optimistic and some are naturally pessimistic. But here's what Dr. Davidson discovered. If you make it a habit to think positive, peaceful, uplifting thoughts, you can reset that factory default setting to the positive side. You can become a naturally happy person if you make a habit of thinking the right thoughts. So happiness is a habit. It's a choice that you make. It doesn't really matter what kind of circumstances you face. It matters what you habitually think and what kind of attitude you habitually adopt. So the first big lesson to learn in how to be happy for the rest of your life is happiness is a habit that you have to develop. Happiness won't seek you out and come to you in the form of a better job or a financial windfall or the perfect love relationship or the ultimate acquisition. Happiness won't find you because it's not looking for you. If you want to be happy, you need to recognize that happiness is a choice you make and a habit that you develop. If you want to be happy for the rest of your life, you have to let go once and for all to the idea that happiness is going to come to you in the shape of pleasant circumstances. Because your circumstances will never, and by never, I mean never, bring you happiness. We always seem surprised when we hear of a famous singer or an actor that attempts or commits suicide, because we think that person has it all. They're successful, they're rich, they're famous, and everybody loves them. What in the world did they have to be unhappy about? That's what I want you to understand. If you're still hanging on to the idea that if you could have what they have, fame, wealth, and success, that your problems would just magically disappear and you'd be happy all the time, then you're still not getting it. If you say, if only I could be in that guy's shoes, if only I could trade places with that person, if only I could have what they have, then I'd be happy. But if that's what you think, you are nowhere near the point of where you're going to experience happiness. because happiness comes from within. It's a choice you make and a habit that you develop. Now, with all that in mind, tonight I want to talk to you about 3 things that you can do to nurture the happiness habit in your daily life. These are 3 things that will help you to break the pattern of being typically unhappy and help you to create a happiness restore point, if you will. So first of all, start saying thanks. Paul begins the letter of Philippians by saying in verses 3 through 5, Philippians 1, verses 3 through 5. Man. He said, I give thanks to my God for every remembrance of you, always praying with joy for all of you in my every prayer, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. Notice the proximity of those 2 words, thank and joy. There's a connection between those 2. You see it again in 1 Thessalonians 5, 16 through 18, when he said, rejoice always, pray constantly, give thanks in everything, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. So do you want to be filled with joy and happiness? Then start saying thanks. It's impossible to be unhappy and thankful at the same time. The 2 don't mix. It's kind of like oil and water. They repel one another. You can't say, God, thank you for this job, and remain a disgruntled employee at the same time. You can't say, God, thank you for my spouse, and remain critical of them all the time. You can't say, God, thank you for my life, and complain about every inconvenience you have to endure. When you start saying thank you, you close the door on that perpetual state of dissatisfaction, and you open a new door that leads to joy and happiness and contentment. Just like Paul begins this letter with a statement of thanks, I encourage you to begin your day, each day, with a statement of thanks. There will always be things happening around you that don't go the way you want them to go. That's just the way life is. Your spouse may still make you mad sometimes. Your boss may still expect too much of you sometimes. Your body's still going to ache and act up sometimes. And if you want, you can waste all your energy asking God, why isn't my life better? Why isn't this different? Why isn't it easier? But the truth is, the more you think on those types of things, the more you nurture unhappiness and frustration. And the truth is, while there may be some things in your life that are less than perfect, there are also thousands of things that are wonderful and beautiful and incredible and memorable. So make it your practice to thank God for those things, first thing every day and all throughout the day. And if you need to, you can make a list of all the things that you have to be thankful for. Your life, your health, your friends, your family, your job, your possessions, whatever it is. A study done at the University of California found that people who maintained a weekly gratitude journal were more optimistic about the future and had a greater sense of satisfaction. Now, I had never heard of a gratitude journal until I started studying for this message. And so I actually went to Google and I typed in gratitude journal. There are hundreds of examples of gratitude journals out there. You can even go on to Amazon and buy one. But there are pages that list things. So, I mean, there are pages that like are a page a day that say, I am thankful for it. And it lists different areas of your life that you fill out. Or there was pages that had each page represented a week, and there was a day for Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, where you went in and you wrote down things that you were thankful for on those specific days. Benjamin Franklin said, happiness is produced not so much by great pieces of fortune that seldom happen as by the little advantages that occur every day. So make it a point to look for those little advantages, the little things, and say thank you for each and every one of them. And here's the second thing that you can do to develop the happiness habit. Look for the silver lining. Now, I know that this point is kind of a cliche, okay? But it really does say it best, okay? Now, this cliche dates all the way back to 1634, when Milton said in a poem, every cloud has a silver lining. And the saying came about because storm clouds, which are very dark, often have a silver gleam around the edge, sunlight gleam that you can see. And the idea is that along with this storm that the clouds bring, it also brings something of value. There may be trouble, but there's always a way to benefit from it. And that's exactly what Paul did when he wrote Philippians. Here he is, stuck in prison, no doubt tempted to say, woe is me, woe is my life. I'm stuck here in jail. I can't go where I want to go. I can't do the things that I want to do. All my hopes and dreams have vanished. Woe is me. But instead of saying that, Paul finds a way to say, you know what? This situation may not be good, may not be ideal, but something good can come from it. Look at verses 12 through 14 here in Philippians 1. He says, now I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has actually resulted in the advance of the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to everyone else that my imprisonment is in the cause of Christ. Most of the brothers in the Lord have gained confidence from my imprisonment and dare even more to speak the message fearlessly. He's saying here that since I've been in prison, since my message has been silenced, there are a whole lot of folks who have risen up to take my place. And so, instead of just one person who was preaching the good news, now there are a whole bunch of them. Hardly a day goes by that we don't get hit with some piece of bad news. And we can either let the bad news defeat us, or we can find the blessing inside of it. I've known people who experienced tragedy in their lives and who said afterward, as bad as that was, it gave me the opportunity to reconnect with my faith, or to reevaluate my priorities, or to restore my relationship with my family. When you face a difficulty, whether it's a minor inconvenience or a major catastrophe, make it a habit to ask, what good can ultimately come of this? Every cloud that comes your way has a silver lining. And instead of letting the storm destroy your happiness, look for the hidden benefit. We can see how Paul took this attitude to the next level and applied it to his colleagues in ministry who were trying to stir up trouble for him. Now, granted, today we have the advantage of history, and we recognize the authority of Paul and his rightful place in church leadership. But in his day, it wasn't like that. There were quite a few folks who really weren't too fond of Paul. They didn't like him, and they didn't want want him to be in charge of anything. They didn't like his theology. He was considered far too liberal for those who wanted the Christian faith to be a new form of Phariseeism. So when Paul was put in prison, many of the ones who opposed his leadership became even more bold in their evangelism for the purpose of trying to rub it in his face. But listen to what Paul said about it. Look at verses 15 through 18. To be sure, some preach Christ out of envy and strife, but others out of goodwill. These do so out of love, knowing that I am appointed for the defense of the gospel. The others proclaim Christ out of rivalry, not sincerely seeking to cause me anxiety in my imprisonment. But what is the matter? Just that in every way, whether out of false motives or true, Christ is proclaimed. And in this I rejoice. Paul could have focused on the fact that these people didn't agree with him on every theological issue. He could have focused on the fact that these people were motivated more by selfish ambition than love. And he could have spent all of his energy attacking them and their bad motives. But instead, he looked for the silver lining. Whether from false motives or true motives, Christ was being preached. And that is what he focused on, because that was the silver lining. I'm guessing that there's someone that you can think of that knows what buttons to push on you. They know how to get your goat, if you will. They have a way of taking credit when it isn't due them. They have a way of getting out of responsibility. Or they have a way of making snide remarks when you do something right and gloating when you make a mistake. And I'm guessing there's someone you know that's like that. Because just about every one of us have at least one person in our lives that's like that. You can let this person's rotten attitude destroy your joy, or you can learn to say, you know what? In spite of everything, this person does add one or two positive elements to the mix. And in doing so, you aren't endorsing everything that this person does, but you're learning to recognize good in all situations, even in those whose motives are less than honorable. And if you're not careful, you're going to find yourself spending a good portion of each day stressed out about what someone else is doing. Maybe it's a backstabbing guy at work, or the over-demanding neighbor, or the unappreciative spouse, or the irresponsible teenager. None of you have ever experienced that, have you? If you're not careful, you'll let these people rob you of your joy. You're going to let them steal your happiness from you. It's much better to say, I can't control what this person does, but I'm not going to let them get to me. I recognize the good that they do, and I'm just simply going to trust God to take care of the rest. And that brings us to our third thing that you can do to develop the happiness habit. Expect the best from God. In Philippians 1, we see Paul's inherent optimism. He believes that God is in control and that ultimately things are going to work out for the best. Look at verse 6. Jump back to there. He says, I am sure of this, that he who started a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. He's saying, I believe in you because I believe that God is able to finish what it is that he started in your life. Paul also applied this attitude in his own situation. He was facing an uncertain future. He knew that perhaps he would be tortured and executed for his faith. And yet, look in verses 20 through 25. He said, my eager expectation and hope is that I will not be ashamed about anything, but that now as always, with all boldness, Christ will be highly honored in my body, whether by life or by death. And he goes on to say in verse 21, for me, living is Christ, and dying is gain. And then he says in verse 22, now if I live on in the flesh, this means fruitful work for me, and I don't know which one I should choose. I am pressured by both. I have the desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. But to remain in the flesh is more necessary for you. Since I am persuaded of this, I know that I will remain and continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith. He's saying here, I know that God is in control of this whole situation. He's in control of my life, and he's in control of your life. And he's going to work out things for the best, for his glory. Paul said the exact same thing in Romans 8:28 when he said, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. It's easier to develop the habit of happiness when you realize that God is in control, that he's working everything out for good. Now, I understand, I realize that some of you may be hurting right now. You're struggling with anger or bitterness or resentment or fear. These things stand before you as huge obstacles to your happiness. And let's face it, it's hard to be joyful when someone has broken your heart. It's hard to be joyful when tomorrow looks like it's going to be cloudy and gray. Happiness is a tough choice to make sometimes. It's a lot easier to ride the wave of whichever circumstance comes your way. To let that set of circumstances make you miserable and then wait for another set of circumstances to come along that might make you happy. That's how most people end up doing it. But there's a better way. You can create your own happiness. You can develop a happiness mindset because it's a choice that you make. Real happiness has nothing to do with your circumstances and everything to do with your attitude. So for the rest of this week, I encourage you to start sowing seeds of the happiness habit. Start saying thank you. Say thank you to God, to your kids, to your neighbors and friends, to your spouse. Look for the silver lining in everything, especially in the irritating behavior of others. You can't control circumstances and you can't control what others do. But you can make it a habit to say, this is what's good about this situation. This is a positive outcome that I can focus on. And then expect the best from God. Trust God's ability to turn difficult situations totally around. Trust God's ability to bring out the best in people and in circumstances. Happiness is your choice. And it's as close or as far as you decide to let it be. You can be a rock star or a movie star or a millionaire and still be miserable. You can be broke and barely getting by and filled with joy every day. It's your choice. Choose happiness. Take out your prayer sheets.